Hello and welcome to episode 45 of the Peter Podcast. I'm your host, reporter Taylor Clydesdale, and with me this week is Jane Davidson. Jane is running for council in Town Ward, and today we're going to be talking about the structure of council meetings and the way that people delegate to council.
Look at the model we're working from. People go to council. Some of the councillors appear to arrive with their minds already met because of the research they've done and the staff reports they've read and the consultation they've done. Citizens groups come and people get 7 minutes, I believe it's 7 minutes at the microphone to make a position. Then immediately a vote is taken.
And we're also going to be talking about public engagement as well as topics like the Parkway and the environment. So, hope you enjoy the show.
Okay, well, hello, I'm Jane Davidson. I'm running for councillor in Town Ward. I'm running in response to the last provincial election. It was kind of not an impetuous decision, but a sudden decision based on what I heard on CBC radio the morning after the night before, which was the provincial election. And I knew what a Ford government would mean in terms of protecting the environment, stopping climate change, and also ways to protect our more vulnerable citizens. And I wanted to make sure that Peterborough sets a progressive agenda, and also that we start working towards energy self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency. That's a mouthful, isn't it?
Oh, don't worry. Yeah. I've had much worse guests, so
anyway, I'm not worried. I'm doing the best I can. This is
You're doing great. So.
So I just I went down and filed my papers, and I've got a fantastic, extensive, deep background with tons of experience, and I'm very strong in terms of standing up for what I believe in and for other people. So that's why I'm running.
So what is your background? What's the experience that makes you qualified to be a city councillor?
Well, I'm really glad you asked me that question. Initially, before I was here in Peterborough, I was a reporter for the Globe and Mail business section, the ROB, Toronto Star Business Today. And after that, I went into, when I had stayed home for a number of years with my children, became a single mom, went back into the workforce in public relations as senior PR for DuPont Canada. Oh, and prior to that, I took a job with the local Anglican diocesan paper and was the editor there, and then switched over to public relations so that I could have more time with my children. So I've got background on both sides, public relations and good media. And then I moved here. My parents had retired here as a single mom, and I became campaign director for the United Way when I came here.
Okay.
That was not a natural or terrific fit. And so then I moved back into what I'm good at, which is asking hard questions, and I also love to write. And I'm a media trainer as well. So I was Sylvia Sutherland's publicity chair during her last run as mayor. And then I was fortunate enough to be doing some public relations and communications work for the city after the flood, right when the flood hit. So I got that job that I ended up under the sombrero of taking care of all the media relations and speech writing and setting the agenda for all the media material after the flood to keep people informed. And that's where I got a really, really good grounding in municipal politics. Because I was serving the council as well as the staff in that role.
So we've got, in this election, 3 different people from news backgrounds. We've got you, we've got Paul Rellinger, we've got Dave McGowan all running for council. What is it about the news background that you think makes people good set for council?
You start to really care about people because you're interviewing them and writing about them all the time. And you realize, I think what happens is you start to realize the limitations around doing that. So fine, I interview you, for example, find out whatever your particular thing is, do a really good job at covering it, and then I have to let it go and move on to the next thing. And so in one way, you're always in service. If you're a journalist, you have that. A good journalist, you have that in the back of your mind all the time. And even as a media relations person, I also should mention I was media relations for the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. Impact that everyone loves to hate. And in my mind, always was I always practiced good, decent, honorable PR, which is I was there to serve people's need for information. They make good decisions when they have good information. So moving from that, it just seemed like a natural fit, and I'm very comfortable speaking to groups of people, and I'm also I've got a little bit of a history. Even though I have a business background, I'm a hybrid because I was an activist. I was a leader. Apparently, I got that tag, even though I wasn't looking for it, in the fight to save the downtown colleges that some people may remember.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was actually a wonderful experience. I learned even more then. So I've learned a great deal over my lifetime. The other thing is I have a certificate in mediation from the South Central Ontario Mediation Centre, and I also have 2 years of training as a psychotherapist.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
You have a broad skill set then.
I do, yes.
Okay. So how would you put that skill set to use at the council table? What do you think you would be able to offer the City Hall that's not currently there, or add to it?
Well, okay. Well, if I can just kind of reshape your question a bit, because there's a lot that is already there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to trash the current council. All I can do is build on what I think I could add or bring. First of all, I ask really good questions, and that comes from years and years as a journalist. And the other thing is I'm very good at sensing the pulse of how people feel, and I also believe that I would love to see far more citizen engagement. And because we have such a seniors population, that means we have to take City Council on the road out to them. And this only requires a bylaw change. I've checked this with the city clerk. Now, he may jump all over me if I've got it wrong, and that would be fine, because, getting the right information is most important out to people. But City Council, what is the reason that City Council doesn't go out and do its meetings ward by ward and move around? There's nothing written in stone that says City Council meetings have to be at City Hall. And we have a lot of people who feel disenfranchised because they have mobility issues. Their brains still work, their hearts still work, and their mouths still work, and they still have something to say. And we're not getting those wonderful ideas, but we will if we take council on the road. That's one idea. The other one is lots and lots of ward meetings in common rooms, in apartment buildings, for instance. Most of the people in those buildings, town ward, as you know, the boundaries have changed. So now we get the good folks in those apartment buildings on Park Hill and Hedonics. Many of them are not online because of the housing affordability issue. They're paying more than 50% of their income to hang on to their apartments. So they can't afford the internet, or they don't choose to be on it. They have mobility issues, so they can't get out to things. In fact, I just heard that some of them can't even afford a bus pass. So we take meetings, ward meetings, when I'm elected, to them in their common rooms, and they are delighted by that idea, really eager to participate. So those are a couple of things that I think I would definitely bring, is the initiative. And I've got all kinds of vision and creative ideas as well. I mean, I could probably write a book. But
now, that certainly sounds like a really interesting idea, to bring council meetings to different wards. Now, where would these council meetings be held? Because, council chambers are a very big space. There needs to be space for the gallery in the back for citizens that want to sit there and enjoy the meeting.
There's look at church halls. Come on, they're huge. They're bigger than the council chambers. I think that would be, Taylor, I think that would be really easily solved, by holding them in church halls. Most churches are now totally accessible, so then you don't have the issues with wheelchairs and walkers. That's one that just comes to mind right away. And a lot of the common rooms that I saw in apartment buildings were quite large. And if you couldn't hold a council meeting in there, you could certainly hold a ward meeting, which is most pertinent to a lot of people.
Okay. So why is citizen engagement and being able to go out to your constituents and hold ward meetings in their wards so important to you?
Because they're telling me they feel disenfranchised, and I already had that sense. Look at the model we're working from. People go to council. Some of the councillors appear to arrive with their minds already met because of the research they've done and the staff reports they've read and the consultation they've done. Citizens groups come, and people get 7 minutes, I believe it's 7 minutes, at the microphone to make a position. Then immediately a vote is taken. There's no time to think, reflect, check back, go back to those people and ask for more detail, which they're only too happy to provide. And so just witness what happened with the Ashborough village vote. People stood up and made some darn good cases for an incomplete transportation plan, concerns about stormwater management. Nobody raised climate change and the effect that bringing on the carbon emissions that we're going to be adding to the air around Peterborough with 1,400 cars. So a whole lot of stuff either partly happened or didn't happen, and then boom, a vote's taken and the thing's on its way. I firmly believe that if we change the model and give people time to, first of all, time to present their citizens time to present to council. I mean, citizens elect us to represent them. Mm-hmm. So I was sitting there that day. I was there at council watching us, and I'm thinking, this is bizarre. It had the optics of, we're here, we're going to do a presentation. Council will go through the motions of listening. A couple of councillors really are listening. And then they take the vote as though no one has spoken against the development, or no one has raised concerns about perhaps needing to do more good planning.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've spoken with a few councillors, and they've said that, on a few issues, they have had good engagement with the public, but there are sometimes just cases where they simply disagree with the what they hear during those meetings. Is it good public engagement to have those public meetings, or to have people delegate and then disagree with them? Like, what is the role of a city councillor? Are you allowed to disagree? Do you have to be there to vote the way that the public, your constituents, tell you to vote?
That's a hell of a good question, especially if you've got constituents coming down on both sides of an issue. I would say, I'll give you an example where I think citizens were ignored and there's large agreement around this, and that's the sale of PDI. To my mind, the role of a good council would have been to cancel the thing. First of all, we have to, part of my philosophy, and I will tell you that I am a member of the Green Party of Ontario, which will give you an idea of where I am philosophically on climate change and on carbon fee and dividend, all of those things. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where was I? Oh yeah, PDI. So certainly keeping energy local is hugely important and part of what I believe in. And so I would be in line with all the people who were opposed to the sale of it, which seems to be just about everybody I talk to when I'm going door to door anyway. So quite often, when people have the right, brings us back to information. When people have the right information and access to the facts, they will very often make the right decision. What happened there? Council didn't listen. Council listened to other voices. People felt disenfranchised and frustrated. I think this may be, in fact, the PDI sale may have been, I can't speak for the others, that was also a factor in my running. When I saw how that was managed, mm-hmm. I really don't want to ever see anything like that happen again.
And you said earlier that another key reason why you were running is because of what the Ford government means. What does the Ford government mean for Ontario and for Peterborough?
Okay, well, that's too big a question for me to tackle as a town ward. I'm going to weasel out of that one. First of all, cancelling the green retrofit, which is hugely important because we've really got to get at carbon emissions fast. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you've seen the Al Gore slideshow that's going around right now, we have, and this is NASA data, okay, 3 years before climate change becomes absolutely irreversible and uncontrollable. The best we can do now is stop it. We can't go back, and we have to get off oil. We absolutely have to. And so watching him cancel, cap and trade, I mean, I prefer a carbon fee and dividend, which is do you know what carbon fee and dividend is?
No, please explain.
Okay. Well, I think I hope I've got this right, and I know the Greens will let me know if I've got it wrong. But as it was explained to me, and I just love this, if you go to the dump to get rid of an old sofa or something. You're paying a fee to add to the dump. And by the way, our dumps are full of plastics. That's a whole other issue. But you have to pay a fee because you're dumping something into a space. Okay? Well, corporations and municipalities and cities, especially city-states, they are dumping 67% of the emissions of the world come from city-states into the atmosphere. And that would include all their businesses, their industries, whatever. So where's the dumping fee? Think of the atmosphere as a city dump. So they're dumping and they're not paying, it would be a fee. And then the dividend is that fee then goes directly into the bank accounts of citizens of Ontario.
Okay.
It's simple and it's elegant and it's wonderful. And this will also help us pay for the social programs that we desperately need.
So rather than have everyone pay a little bit of piece of that carbon tax, you instead charge the people who are the carbon producers, and then that money goes back into people's pockets.
Exactly.
Okay. And is that something that you would hope to happen at a municipal level, or?
Well, I think, you see, city-states are incredibly powerful. And this is something people don't realize. They say, what can we do? It's the province, it's whatever. Actually, the provincial and federal government pay a lot of attention to what they hear coming from their cities. Where is most of the population concentrated? Where are their voters living? They're living in cities for the most part. So it's politically suicidal for them not to pay attention to what they hear coming out of their cities. And if a city doesn't feel strong enough, say doesn't have a large enough population base, then what they do is partner with neighboring cities who have similar issues and go as a conglomerate. There's all kinds of things. I mean, I could go on for hours. I've got all kinds of ideas. But this is, there's all kinds of ways that you can use the power of the city-state to affect change.
Okay. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that because we've got a few more topics to discuss.
Okay, yes.
We're going to take a short little break and come back after we refill on water and talk about issues like Parkway and housing and maybe how the environment relates to both of those as well.
Okay, great.
Awesome. We'll be right back then.
Thanks.
Well, we're back on the Peter podcast, and let's start talking about a couple of issues that people care about. During the break, we talked a bit about, before the break, we talked a bit about PDI. Let's move on to the Parkway, and maybe you can tell me about what your stance is in the Parkway.
Okay, well, my cards say no Parkway on them, so that tells you my stance, but that's a really quick, short response.
Really good two-word response.
Yeah, no Parkway. However, when I want to say something before I answer the question, just step back and say about this issue, it's almost like discussing abortion in terms of for and against passion, the way people feel. And that's one thing I have encountered at different doorways. That people are either passionately for it or passionately against it.
What are the reasons that people are so passionately for and against it that you're hearing?
Well, okay, I can tell you what I'm hearing. And of course, I'm just canvassing in town ward. People who are living on the outer edges of the ward where they are more affected by traffic tend to be more in favor of having something done. And the only something that they know about is the Parkway. So just adding my interpretation, a lot of the reason they want it is they want something done. And they also see cut-throughs in their neighborhood in terms of traffic. Those things can be solved by traffic calming measures, by the way. Building a parkway is not the only answer to some of that. Against, of course, is people are very concerned about carbon emissions, and if you build a road like that through a city, you increase the carbon emissions into the atmosphere that people breathe in, and that affects their health. And there are now 2 studies, among many, that prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that people who live around a concentration of carbon emissions from vehicular traffic have a 200% higher incidence of breast cancer and prostate cancer. Those are 2 studies that came out of Montreal. So this is real. The other thing is that we have to start getting off a fossil fuel economy, and it's not a 7th generation answer to our problems. Well, I can hear the people in favor of the Parkway saying, well, yes, Jane, but what about right now? It's a problem. I have a different perspective in that I do come from Toronto, and so sitting in a traffic jam in Toronto is a very different experience than one here in Peterborough. And so I don't necessarily experience it in the same way with the same degree of frustration, because a 10-minute delay versus the 45 or hour and a half, 45-minute, hour and a half long delays that I've experienced when I used to live in Toronto are, it's a matter of perspective. Mm-hmm. That said, this is their reality, and we have to respect that. There are lots of options. One thing I will also say, people against are very concerned about Jackson Park and protecting that really beautiful green space. And apparently I've been told there was a streetcar through it at one time, long time ago, and I do believe we should be bringing streetcars back to Peterborough, by the way. In fact, I think we could be a leading model community. GE were the ones that built them and then built their motors. And it's part of the green economy that we could be looking at to completely pivot on how we take care of our city and how we run it. But so the Parkway is an older school approach to a way of living that we have to change if we want to get away from stop climate change and keep our air, food, water, soil, everything healthy. So that's, I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but that's kind of, and when I talk to people at the door, I say, well, what would work for you? Would putting, and we, obviously our bus system needs fixing. It's archaic, and it doesn't work for people. So would providing more transit help? Some will say yes, some will say no. A lot of seniors will say yes, more buses, better buses. And the thing is, you make sure that they're electric buses so that they aren't pouring diesel into the atmosphere. Others will say no, that wouldn't work, and then the fix becomes a modified ring road of some sort. And do I have the skill set or the background to tell you exactly where it should go? No, I don't. I've heard lots of different ideas, enough to know that there are lots of different ideas and possibilities, so that we can take people around the city where they can have access, almost like that, spoke and wheel approach coming in.
Now, you mentioned carbon emissions earlier as one concern about the Parkway. I remember reading it was a city study, and I can't remember the exact timing of when that came out. It was probably when the bridge over Jackson's Park was still included in the plan.
Yes.
Just about how by having the Parkway there, it would reduce emissions because people aren't taking the long way around and doing the cut-through traffic on residential streets, and instead it provides one clear route that speeds up traffic and reduces emissions. Do you see that as being the case?
Well, I haven't seen the study, so it's kind of hard for me to...
That's fair.
But I can tell you that other studies that I've read is when you build a road like that, you not only divert your own car traffic, you bring in more cars. So you end up with cars from other places people using the road more. In other words, it draws more traffic overall to your city. And so I would argue that it's really hard for me to answer that question, Taylor, because I haven't seen the study, but it's always the case that when you cut through the middle of a city with a parkway, and that also does things socioeconomically and all kinds of other ways that are not healthy. It can actually kill a city, but that you draw other traffic that wasn't there in the first place, and that's why you end up with an emission problem. CO2 problem.
So in place of the Parkway, then, improvements to transit, ring
massive,
road?
Huge, massive improvements to transit where we have continuous buses running. In other words, model ourselves after Ottawa. Look at Transpo. I mean, you've got civil servants who earn $150,000 a year taking the bus all the time because it's so good, even though they don't have a subway. And what is to stop us from putting a streetcar system with the very latest tech back into the city, running it up and down George and Water in a loop initially. And it used to be, in fact, I was looking at it today, and I don't know if I can grab my notes quickly enough. I can't. But I was looking back to seeing where we used to be because we were very well known for our streetcar system, which we got rid of in 1928. And it actually looked pretty good. It was along Charlotte and Clonsilla, and it also ran up and down George Street. So we just bring in a new either a streetcar system such as the one that they're using in Toronto, or an LRT going east, west, and north, south. No need for Parkway, really. And, you know, if you build things like that, people will use it with relief. The other answer is we have a community bus now, one. You know about that, the new special route to help. I think the objective was to help move seniors and people who are have mobility issues to get around to medical appointments and down to Lansdowne Place, into the heart of the city for shopping, to get for medical tests, that kind of thing, to get around. I suggest we need another 5 of those. Well, no, because it's only going once an hour, and you're stuck on the whole loop. You get more going more often, and some of them say leapfrogging some stops, so it doesn't take an hour to get all the way around or more. And you will also find that you've served a very precious and important and significant demographic of the city.
And do you think that by improving transit, that's going to get people to take their cars off the road and, and alleviate the traffic problem in Peterborough?
I really do. I really do. Now, not totally, but you see what you do, and you and I talked about this when you turned off the machine here, but ride sharing gets people out of their cars too. I mean, in Toronto, there are a lot of people. I think if I lived in Toronto now, I wouldn't have a car. I wouldn't need it, because they have a ride share program and they have a fantastic transit system. And I'd also feel good about the fact that I was helping to preserve what was left of the you know, of the environment. So yeah, yes, I feel quite strongly that people would use it. We have well-informed, incredibly lovely people living here, and of all income levels. I mean, this sounds really corny, but when I'm going door to door, I keep falling in love with these people, because they are all such great, terrific souls, and they are paying attention to the media. They have quite open minds. They do want to do something about the social issues in Peterborough, and they want to do something about climate change. They just need some good leadership and some great ideas.
Okay. I want to move on from the topic of transportation, because we only have time for about one more topic.
Good, juicy question? Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about housing.
Oh, goody.
Now, in specific, let's talk about housing in Town Ward, because, you know, the Town Ward is one of these areas where, you know, infilling and intensification are the I words of well, they're kind of the themes of resolving our housing crisis in that area. So what do you think the housing plan needs to be for Town Ward?
I think that, well, you're talking about homelessness or affordable housing, because they're actually two separate issues. So because I mean,
right now, we're at a housing shortage in Peterborough. Our housing prices are very high, and we're at a 1% vacancy rate.
So you're talking about rental accommodation.
Yeah, I think, well, there's so many different parts of this conversation that you can kind of start off wherever you want, because, you know, we don't have affordable housing for people who are in poverty.
No, we don't.
We also don't have housing in other parts of the market for people to move out of their low-income affordable housing so that people can move into it. So it's a multi-part conversation. I'll let you decide where you want to begin.
Yeah, the waiting lists are appalling. I mean, rent geared to income is 9 to 11 years waiting. Seniors housing is 4 to 6 years, according to, I think, was that the Department of Health survey? One of the surveys put out. And I thought, gosh, that's worse than I thought it was. I'm a renter now. I used to own my own home. I was very surprised at how little I could get for what I could afford. We have far too many people paying over 30% of their income on housing, and that's considered unhealthy. And it's unhealthy because it ends up impacting their ability to buy nourishing food and to have any quality of life. So what I'm doing is finding people, especially in the apartment buildings, but also door to door, who are paying 50% of their income on rent. And so it's it's complex, but so even what some people call affordable isn't affordable because we have a much higher poverty rate than other cities in Ontario and a lower overall average income.
And affordable too is kind of, it's a weird word because what do you consider affordable? Do you consider affordable to be something that is just below market rent? Or do you go with something that's rent geared to income a bit, something like Sunshine Homes here in Peterborough, where the amount that you're charged for rent is relative to the amount of income that you make that month?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and affordable housing, I think the way it's used by the city, correct me if I'm wrong, is based on the model of 30%, and they've sort of done some averaging. But when I see the chart, I know that it's a one-bedroom is still unaffordable for many people. I really believe in basic income, and I think that if the province is unwilling, since they have canceled the pilot, basic income works, and it does not, in other words, it doesn't pull anyone down to bring anyone else up. Mm-hmm. And it really, in a country as rich as Canada, the amount of poverty we're seeing now is starting to become appalling. And Town Ward is a microcosm, a beautiful example, poor use of the word beautiful, of all of these issues. There it is in our faces. All we have to do is look at Victoria Park and listen to the people in the apartment buildings. And they're really suffering. So basic income, and the other thing is I believe in the Canada Workers' Benefit. Do you know about that? You see, and I think that people say, well, we're only the city. But we talked to the feds, and they've just come out with a new anti-poverty policy in September, a whole new program. And the Canada Workers' Benefit is a refundable supplement on earnings of low-income workers. The government tops up the wages of workers with households below a determined amount through a cash subsidy. This increases the number, what that does is helps the working poor and makes it easier for the employers to hire them, to hire less skilled workers and give them a chance to get started. So that's just a couple of ideas that I have. Housing, affordable housing. I mean, obviously we have to build more. Obviously we have to do the infilling, and we have to follow the smart up. I'm absolutely in favor of that. One thing I'm really concerned about is that while we're working on all this, and there are groups working on it, as I'm sure you know, people are going to die this winter. I am really worried about those folks in those tents in Victoria Park. And I was just talking to the Sisters of St. Joseph's about this before I came here. It really begs the question when I look at them, who are we? And if we want to attract businesses to the city and they drive by and look at that, the question in their minds is, what sort of a city would I want to invest in this place? Look at how it treats its most vulnerable. So we have to get at this really fast. Now isn't quickly enough in terms of homelessness. And I believe in the housing first approach, which was followed by Medicine Hat. All we have to do is look at other people's successes and modify them. We don't have to invent the wheel. And they solved this. And all we have to do is look at their model, modify it to us, put some pressure on the province, and if we can't get help there, go to the federal government, which is now declaring itself as having, is staging war on poverty. And we will get help for these people really, really fast. And once you get them housed, and you do no means test. In other words, you don't say, are you looking for work? Are you this? Are you that? Are you clean? Are you sober? You get rid of all of that. You give them a house, a home, or an apartment that's decent. Then you bring in the other supports to help them with their other issues. If people get help with shelter, they are less stressed. They are less likely to turn to substance abuse. They are more likely to start to want to turn and give back. This has been proven time and time again. And you see incredible miracles happen once you give them a decent place to live. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I can go talk at length about this because I feel very strongly about it.
I think we're just about to run out of time here.
Okay.
I'm going to leave it with you. Is there anything else that you want to add that we may not have talked about, or anything that you wanted, any messages that you want to get out there?
Well.
Oh, you have a piece of paper ready.
I do. I really want us to become very bold in terms of energy efficiency in the city, and all these things, of course, they're all interconnected. And I think that I would like us to become self-sufficient, using Burlington, Vermont as a model. City similar size, little smaller, very committed to green energy. They are now energy self-sufficient. And this, of course, brings down the cost of energy. You get people working with energy co-ops. You get your more affluent citizens buying bonds on solar energy co-ops. You put these solar shields on top of roofs all over the place. And you get biomass from farmers. There's all kinds of different ways. You do a combined approach, and it can be done. And it saves money, and it also makes money. And it draws the kind of businesses that are working on the technology behind this to this city. So that's kind of my overarching vision, having talked about social issues, but it's all linked. It's all, and then one other thing, do we have time for me to say what I'm about to say? Or
if you're quick.
Okay, I want to see us. Oh, darn, where's that piece of paper? Because I wrote this down before I came.
And I just want to note, I can tell that you're a reporter because your notes are almost illegible.
They are. Yes, it's prescription pad handwriting. I want to see us unify the progressives and the conservatives around a common goal. Because in this city, I feel we are living in two silos, and each silo tends to vilify the other a little bit. Brilliant minds on both sides. The common goal becomes energy self-sufficiency. And I also believe that we need some of the conservative minds, the retirees who have moved here, who were executives and problem solvers, to apply themselves to the issues, all of them, in this city, and watch things start to happen really fast.
All right. Jane, thank you so much for being on the program. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And to everybody else, we're going to continue to cover the municipal election candidates, so we'll see you again soon.